Luo Chong's masterclass in whiplash diplomacy has left the Baiwu tribe leaders, Gu Ji and Tian Hong, utterly shattered. Their welcome was a meticulously crafted psychological assault, from a terrifying military parade to a firepower demonstration disguised as a hunt. They were tempted with feasts that redefined wealth, and then presented with a chillingly simple choice: join the Han tribe and prosper, or become slaves for the resources beneath their land. Now, on a mandatory inspection tour, their primitive worldview is being systematically dismantled. They're confronted with a terrifyingly complex bureaucracy and a baffling concept. Taxes collected are spent back on the people, building roads and schools. They witness Shanghai, a model village overflowing with happy, well-fed children, the ultimate proof of prosperity. They see mountains of snow-white salt, a symbol of unimaginable industrial might and wealth. While their minds are reeling, the Tang tribe has already been absorbed, lured by sweet promises of a brighter future. Luo Chong isn't just a conqueror. He's an empire builder, assimilating entire peoples with a cocktail of overwhelming force and irresistible soft power, building a new world order from the ground up. When the railway line from Tuahai Prefecture to the capital thundered into full operation, Luo Chong felt like he had ants in his pants. He just couldn't sit still. That was the capital, his new home, built brick by brick over several years under his command, especially the future Imperial Palace. And yet, he, the master of the house, had not even laid eyes on it. Now that the railway reached his very doorstep, not taking a trip felt like a betrayal of his long-held dreams. The railway from Tuahai Prefecture to the capital stretched nearly 400 kilometers. Even if the tribe's Endeavor locomotive went flat out, it would take a full 15 hours. This was currently the Han tribe's longest single railway line, requiring 2 stops along the way just to replenish its coal and water. The journey was long, and the carriage seats were unforgivingly hard. 15 hours was the theoretical speed. With inevitable delays and stops, the journey could easily stretch into a full day and night. Bringing the whole family was out of the question. The children were too young. Their ruckus could tear the roof off. Plus, Tang Yao was newly pregnant and needed to avoid such a strenuous journey. After discussing it with them, Luo Chong decided to go alone. Of course, to say he was alone was merely his own modesty. For this inspection tour, Luo Chong had dragged Shu along. To be fair, although Shu had been in charge of logistics for the capital's construction from Tuahai Prefecture, he was just as in the dark about what their new home actually looked like, having only ever seen it on blueprints. Now, with a chance for a field visit at Luo Chong's invitation, Shu could hardly contain his excitement. The two boarded their private train, followed by a squad of Jinwu guards equipped with the latest firearms, all looking sharp. The rear half of the train consisted of a long line of freight cars, fully loaded with hard currency, like steel rebar and cement, rumbling majestically towards the capital. Luo Chong's core team occupied only 3 carriages. Clack, clack, clack. The rhythm was monotonous enough to shake a man's soul from his body. After a full day and night of being rattled to the point where his bones felt loose, the capital, which had only existed on blueprints, finally appeared on the horizon. The moment Luo Chong stepped onto the platform, all the weariness from the journey vanished. A wave of satisfaction washed over him. All these years of hard work, they were absolutely worth it. As he stepped off the train, the scent of fresh stone and earth met him. Before him stood a colossal train station, its upturned eaves and ornate brackets exuding a classical, magnificent aura. At the main entrance, 12 sky-piercing pillars supported the entire station hall. They were called stone pillars, but in reality, it was a magnificent facade. The core was a steel-reinforced concrete skeleton, clad in a seamless layer of thin granite slabs. At first glance, it could fool anyone. The station hall was so spacious it could serve as a drill ground, at least 1,000 square meters. If one ignored the traditional style shell and looked only at the internal structure, it had the rugged grandeur of a factory workshop. Yu Ji, the Jinwu Guard commander in charge of the capital's construction, had already received word and was waiting with his men in the station square. The party mounted their horses, their hooves clopping on the fresh earth as they headed towards the Imperial city. Riding his horse, Yu Ji was like a tour guide showing off his treasures, his mouth never stopping. "Chief, we're going full throttle on the Imperial city right now. The main arterial roads and underground utility lines, we have to get those sorted first. Once that's done, we can build the surface structures however we want." He grew more excited as he spoke. Then we can allocate or sell the land. Anyone who wants to build a shop or a residence can just pay for it themselves, as long as it fits the plan. This way, we save money and can even recoup some of our funds. With that, he pointed at the bare dirt road beneath them and couldn't help but ask, "But Chief, the main roads are still just dirt. The minute it rains, it's a mud pit. When are you finally going to let us pave them with bricks?" Hearing this, Luo Chong flicked his horsewhip lightly and chuckled. "Pave with bricks? That's thinking too small," he laughed. "In the future, all these roads will be paved with shiny, black asphalt. Asphalt roads." Yu Ji was stunned. "That's right. Asphalt isn't great for horses, but think about it. Are stone-paved roads any better? Hooves slip on them all the same. Since neither is perfect, we might as well do it right the first time and use asphalt. It'll save us the money and effort of tearing it all up to rebuild later." Luo Chong's eyes sparkled with his vision for the future. "Besides, horse hooves may not like it, but rubber tires do. We're definitely going to promote bicycles and tricycles in the future. When that time comes, the advantages of these flat asphalt roads will become instantly obvious. We just need a little patience." The group passed through the still under construction city districts and arrived directly at the Imperial City. When the majestic palace complex came into view, even the ever-talkative Luo Chong couldn't help but take a deep breath. The main hall in particular, Hanyuan Hall, was an architectural marvel. Its overall structure resembled the historical Daming Palace of the Tang Dynasty, but numerous large openings had been left in the walls, temporarily covered with wooden planks. "What are those for?" The Shu's mouth was open wide enough to fit a fist. He craned his neck, his eyes tracing the beams on the ceiling. "In the future, all of those spaces will be replaced with glass curtain walls," Luo Chong announced proudly. Previously, the tribe's industrial level wasn't advanced enough to produce such large panes of flat glass. But now that tractors were running all over the place, wasn't manufacturing a few large sheets of glass a piece of cake? The Shu was completely floored. He looked around, feeling as tiny as an ant, and stammered, "Chief, you call this a new home? My heavens, this room is big enough to ride a horse in. What on earth is it for?" Luo Chong roared with laughter. "The Imperial Palace is my home, of course, but it's also the political heart of our Han Empire. This is the future Imperial Court. This Hanyuan Hall is our public face. It won't be open on normal days. It will only be used for major national holidays, celebrations, public memorials, or grand occasions like the great assembly of officials at year's end. Grand, isn't it?" He led the group through the hall's rear door into another massive square, facing a slightly smaller palace. "See that? The one behind is Xianzheng Hall. That's for handling daily government affairs. And further back is Zichen Hall, which is for summoning trusted ministers to discuss secret and important matters." Luo Chong pointed across the landscape with his horsewhip. "These three main halls on the central axis, plus the flanking buildings, are where the high-ranking cabinet ministers will work. Together, they form the front court. This is the administrative center of the entire Han tribe. In the future, you'll be coming here to help me too. From here on back, we enter the inner palace. That's where my family and I will live. Come on, I'll show you." It was only then that the Shu finally understood. It turned out this imperial palace wasn't just the chief's mansion. It was a vast administrative complex. As they continued inward, Luo Chong's tour guide mode switched on again. The entire imperial palace is divided into three parts by the central axis. The middle is the central palace, which is the front court plus the inner palace. To the east is the eastern palace, for the next chief, the crown prince. And to the west, there's a western palace. That's prepared for an old guy like me. When I can't work anymore, I'll move there to retire and leave the central palace to the next generation. Bypassing the western palace, Luo Chong pointed to a neatly planned complex in the distance. Over there are the Imperial Guard barracks. The Jinwu and Shin's guards will be stationed there in the future, protecting the palace in shifts, 24 hours a day. When the full view of the inner palace was revealed, everyone was stunned. The vista opened up dramatically. Across vast, gently sloping lawns, more than a dozen classical and stately pavilions were scattered. Peacock blue glazed tiles flashed brilliantly under the sun, shimmering with a dazzling light that was almost blinding, as if a corner of a heavenly palace had fallen to earth. The doors, windows, and walls, carved from precious woods, exuded an understated luxury. But unlike the isolated, cage-like courtyards of ancient palaces, Luo Chong's inner palace was more like a massive, first-class scenic park. It was filled with beautiful gardens, among which elegant buildings were artfully arranged. He had no intention of making his 3 wives live separately. A family should live together boisterously to feel like a real home. Of course, functional buildings like the Imperial kitchen, the Imperial hospital, the laundry bureau, and the servants' dormitories were still sectioned off into their own courtyards. Finally, in the inner palace, Deshu spotted a massive pit where excavators were still chugging away and tractors were hauling out earth, load after load. He recognized it at once. An artificial lake. He was all too familiar with this. Every time the Han tribe built a new city, they would first dig rivers and lakes. This served as a moat and also provided earth for firing bricks, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. The giant pit before them was clearly the same strategy. After completing their tour, the group rode back to the city proper. The central axis road directly in front of the Imperial Palace Gate was named Vermilion Bird Avenue. The horizontal street before the Palace Gate was called Chang'an Avenue. The naming of the other streets in the city was even more ingenious. They were named directly after the various prefectures and counties under the Han tribe's jurisdiction: Hanyang Road, Ryong Road, Tahai Road. Main roads used prefecture names, while secondary roads used county names. This method was elegantly simple, yet it was deeply meaningful. It was as if the entire map of the Han tribe was condensed into this one city. In the future, no matter which corner you came from, you could find a street in the capital named after your hometown. The sense of belonging this created would be rock solid. Currently, the main work in the city was road construction. Leveling the foundations, road rollers compacting the earth relentlessly, then marking lines, digging sewers, and finally, waiting for asphalt and gravel. Beyond that, various public buildings had already been planned. Squares, altars, the Imperial Ancestral Temple, a bell tower, a museum, a zoo, a grand theater, the Imperial Library, nothing was left out. Luo Chong even planned to make the previous campaign of soliciting books from the public a permanent activity, to be handled by the Imperial Library. He wanted its collection to become the most precious treasure of the entire empire. Educational planning was an even greater priority. Elementary schools would be widespread in villages and towns, middle schools in counties, and high schools in prefectures. Finally, the top students from across the nation would gather in the capital to attend the Taishuo, what Luo Chong remembered as a university. The blueprint of a great capital was already taking shape. It would not only be the center of power, but also the beacon of civilization for the entire Han tribe. For now, building a few universities in the capital would be more than enough. Later, when the population inevitably boomed and the academic competition intensified, it would be simple enough to open branch campuses in the major prefectures. The immediate task was to get the frameworks for public facilities like the library, museum, and grand theater up and running. These prestige projects had to be impressive. The next step was to build rows of shops, restaurants, and inns along the main arteries like Vermilion Bird Avenue and Chang'an Avenue. For this part of the construction, Luo Chong planned for the government to step in directly, building a batch of model homes, and then publicly selling off some of the land. The residential areas would follow the same pattern. High-ranking officials and top scientific researchers would be provided with luxurious mansions as part of their generous benefits package. The rest of the populace would have to pay out of their own pockets. This was the capital, after all, where every inch of land was worth its weight in gold. The tribe might generously grant you a plot for a house, but you had to figure out how to pay for the construction yourself. If you lacked even that ability, what business did you have crowding into the capital? Wouldn't you be better off back home? The capital was, by its very nature, a place where the elite gathered. The method to entice, no, to attract, the nation's talent was also simple and brutal. First move, sell land and houses. Use a dizzying price tag to filter out a large portion of the population. Anyone who could afford a house here, even if not a high official, was certainly a master at making money. Second move, get into university, get a free house. This move was even more ruthless. Imagine the scene. As long as your brain was sharp enough and you studied hard enough, passing the imperial examinations meant soaring to success and escaping poverty for good. Not only would you be given a respectable job with an eye-popping salary, but you would also be awarded a grand residence in the capital. It was an amplified version of the classic tale of a humble farmer in the morning, an official in the emperor's court by evening. Once this news got out, would he have to worry about people not studying themselves to death? As long as you had real talent and knowledge, the tribe guaranteed that the word poor would never again have anything to do with you. Of course, Luo Chong had no intention of creating a rigid class system. As a student of history with a forward-thinking perspective, he knew that the water that carries a boat can also capsize it. If the common people were pushed to the point of starvation, a rebellion wouldn't be far off. Therefore, the Han tribe's plan for common prosperity had to proceed in parallel. The industrialization he was about to promote in the South was the powerful remedy intended to raise the prosperity of the entire nation. On the capital construction site, Luo Chong once again pointed at blueprints and laid out a host of follow-up instructions for Yu Ji. Only then, satisfied, did he take the shoe and board the train for the return journey. Clank, clank. He had barely warmed his seat back in Tuahai Prefecture when an eagle descended with a flutter of wings, carrying an urgent secret message from Lin Fei in Sinan Prefecture. The message contained a single sentence: 30,000 standard-issue Type 2 bolt-action rifles, along with the bullet production lines, have been shipped south. Await delivery. Holy crap! Luo Chong slapped his thigh. He had just remembered a critically important matter. The battalion of Shin's Guard instructors he had brought back wasn't here on vacation. From this day forward, all armies of the Han tribe would bid a complete farewell to cold weapons and sprint into the age of firearms. Click-clack. You could almost hear the crisp sound of a rifle bolt echoing through the sky. Although the local garrisons would temporarily only be equipped with bolt-action rifles, in this world, that weapon was still a context-shattering advantage. Not to mention, the Han tribe already had the even more formidable semi-automatic rifle up its sleeve. With a single order, the entire army was to be reorganized. With the introduction of firearms, the army's combat effectiveness would skyrocket exponentially. A position that previously required 10,000 men to take could now be flattened by 2,000 rifles. So why keep so many soldiers? Wouldn't it be better to trade the saved military pay for crates of gleaming brass bullets? Downsize. The army had to be downsized. The veterans who had been conscripted earlier had spent years in the barracks. It was time for them to go home to their wives, children, and warm beds, and do their part for the tribe's great cause of population growth. Moreover, the tribe's industrialization was rumbling forward. Factories were popping up like mushrooms after a spring rain, and they were all short on manpower. Luo Chong had already planned out a future for these discharged soldiers. After retiring, those who wanted a stable life would be directly placed in state-owned factories, given official employee status, and an iron rice bowl for life. These former soldiers, forged by years of military training, possessed exceptional discipline and a strong sense of responsibility. With a little training, they would all become skilled technical workers. If they didn't want to work in a factory, that was fine too. They could exchange their military merits for a noble title, go home to a few extra acres of fertile land, and become landlords. In addition, the administrative system had a huge demand for personnel. The new police system that Luo Chong was preparing to establish would require a large number of people with military experience. These retired soldiers could simply swap their military uniforms for police uniforms and still have a chance to handle a gun. Luo Chong had long ago tasked Sinan Prefecture with designing police-issue revolvers and shotguns. The tools were all ready. Moving from the battlefield to the streets to continue upholding justice. He was sure plenty of men would be willing to make the switch. Only by arranging a comprehensive support system for them after retirement could the downsizing of the army proceed with rock-solid stability. If soldiers were asked to risk their lives for the tribe only to be cast aside with no support after they took off their armor, wasn't that just begging them to rebel? At this very moment, the Baiwu people, the first to be annexed by the Han tribe, were experiencing a world-shaking transformation in their lives. They had moved into the neatly planned city of Qian Prefecture, and every household had been allocated farmland. At the edge of the fields, machines that chugged out black smoke could pump water up from the ground. Even if the heavens didn't shed a single tear for months, the crops remained lush and green. Their pigs, sheep, chickens, and ducks were raised fat and strong. They had even learned to raise rabbits, which bred litter after litter, providing more meat than they could possibly eat. Such a divine existence was something they would not have dared to dream of before. They knew full well that the reason the Han tribe invested so heavily was for the pitch-black coal mine a dozen miles away and the red iron ore mine near their old home. In their eyes, the people of the Han tribe were like gods descended to the mortal world. They could dig black stones that burned from the ground and smelt iron from red rocks that could cut through steel. It was said that these skills were all learned in a place called a school, so every household happily sent their children to study, especially since it was free. Some of the older generations stubbornly remained in their original villages, guarding their old houses and potato fields, protecting the fading heritage of the Baiwu people. But in the face of the relentlessly advancing wheel of the Han tribe's history, such guardianship seemed utterly futile. You either got on board or you were crushed. There was no third option. The establishment of the school in Xi'an Prefecture, in particular, brought immense joy to the Baiwu parents. To see their own little rascals, who were just rolling in the mud the day before, now sitting properly in a bright, clean schoolhouse, following the Han tribe teacher and chanting ancient primers, that heartfelt joy was more tangible than an extra 300 pounds of potatoes from their fields. Meanwhile, Luo Chong's broad axe was already swinging through the entire military system of the Han tribe. With the futures of the retired veterans secured, Luo Chong's resolve hardened. At a wave of his hand, the elites of the Shin's Guard were dispatched like sparks to the major garrisons of the Han tribe. Their mission was singular: to take those old grunts, accustomed to swords, spears, and halberds, and forge every last one of them into sharpshooters. Downsizing the army wasn't as simple as issuing a decree. It required a certain artistry. Luo Chong's artistry was hidden within this massive training exercise. Bang, bang, bang. On the firing range, those with good aim would stay. They would be reorganized into the new firearm units and enjoy a privileged status from then on. As for those talents who were constitutionally incompatible with firearms, who could close their eyes and still somehow manage to shoot themselves in the foot, well, apologies. They were to be honorably discharged and sent home to build their beautiful new homeland. The benefits of this approach were almost too numerous to count. First, it directly screened for elites through practical application, ensuring that only the best remained and that the Army's combat effectiveness skyrocketed. Second, it served as free pre-employment training for the soldiers who were to be discharged. When they transferred to the local police systems in the future, at least they would know not to point their guns at their own people. Thanks to the tribe's transport ships, which were as fast as flying fish, 30,000 brand-new bolt-action rifles and 600 general-purpose machine guns were delivered to the front lines in a matter of days. Along with them came a complete bullet production line, which was quickly set up and put into operation. Luo Chong's mental abacus was clicking away furiously. With a lavish configuration of 2 machine guns per platoon, 600 machine guns were enough to arm 10 garrisons. But after downsizing, how many units would even be left? The immediate priority was to dispatch the battalion of Shin's Guard instructors. First stop, Xiongzhou Island. The island had 6 garrisons, totaling 15,500 men. Luo Chong planned to transfer the entire 3,000-man Xiaoqi Guard cavalry back to the mainland and deploy them to the Great Grasslands. In their place, he would move the most powerful cavalry from the grasslands, the Qinyo Guard, to the capital to serve as his personal Imperial Guard. After all, his Jinwu Guard was primarily a ceremonial and intelligence unit, and the Shin's Guard was pure firearms infantry. He felt uneasy without a fast-moving mobile force by his side. The remaining 5 units on Xiongzhou Island, after completing their training, would be consolidated and reorganized into 3 regiments, forming a single brigade, more than enough to defend the entire island. The surplus men? Discharged, reassigned, and sent home. As for the newly annexed Tang tribe territory, the people's loyalty was not yet stable, so he would leave it untouched for now. Next target, the Great Grasslands. The 3 grassland prefectures had over 10,000 cavalry. The Qinyo Guard was to swap places with the Xiaoqi Guard, a move that would actually reduce his forces there by 1,000 men. But Luo Chong wasn't worried in the slightest. Fewer men did not mean less combat power. He had no intention of equipping the cavalry with long, clumsy bolt-action rifles. Trying to work a bolt on a bouncing horse wasn't fighting, it was acrobatics. His plan was to give each cavalryman 2 guns. One was a carbine based on the Type 56, a semi-automatic rifle that could fire a continuous stream of shots with each pull of the trigger. The other was a devastating 8-shot shotgun. In close-quarters combat, that weapon was practically a cheat code. One blast, and whether man or horse, you were going down. The cavalry of the future would no longer just be about slashing from horseback. They would be a new type of soldier entirely, mounted for mobility, dismounted for battle. They would use the unparalleled mobility of their warhorses to rapidly reach the battlefield, then dismount to form a firing line of steel. In the West, they had a famous name, dragoons. As for the Fubo Guard Navy, they would make do with the new rifles and shotguns for now. Luo Chong planned to bide his time for another 2 years before making his next major move. Once he had steam-powered ironclads, he would give them the full package: rapid-fire cannons, machine cannons, and torpedoes. There was no need to rush. With the orders issued, the entire military machine of the Han tribe roared to life. The warships of the Fubo Guard, supplemented by temporarily requisitioned transport ships, shuttled back and forth between Tuahai Prefecture and Cheongzhou Island. Within a week, they had completed the transport of instructors and weapons, as well as the troop swap of the Xiaoqi Guard. Back in Xi'an, the Shu found an empty warehouse and installed the bullet production line. A temporary ammunition factory began to clang and bang its way into operation. On Cheongzhou Island, the Feixiong Guard, Highland Guard, Baotao Guard, 5 units, 12,500 soldiers in total, all assembled at the former Xiaoqi Guard's camp. The firing range was cordoned off as a military-restricted zone to prevent any foolish civilians from wandering in and getting their heads split open by a stray bullet. All was ready. 600 Shen's Guard instructors stood before the troops like 600 gods of death. Open the crates. Issue the rifles. At the command, tens of thousands of new rifles were distributed. The cold touch of steel made every veteran's blood begin to boil. Each instructor had to train over 20 rookies, and the pressure was immense. Fortunately, these were all seasoned soldiers. Close order drill was skipped entirely. They went straight to the real deal: disassembly, assembly, principles of operation, and marksmanship. Meanwhile, back at the capital's massive palace construction site, on the platform before Hanyuan Hall, the worried expression on Yu Ji's face finally eased when Luo Chong promised that the stone materials could be transported over next spring. But then his relief proved short-lived. "Chief, stone alone isn't enough. What we're lacking here are skilled hands. Artisans," he said, pointing at the slaves who were arduously hauling bricks as he poured out his grievances. "The 3,000 old slaves you sent initially are obedient and can handle rough work like laying walls. But the 5,000 new ones who came later, my heavens, they don't understand a word and they're insubordinate. Just taming them took a huge amount of effort. Now they're only good for grunt work like digging. The foundation of this Hanyuan Hall right here was laid by that batch of old slaves. But they can't do the more delicate work, like carving. We need our own people for that. Chief, please allocate more artisans to me." Luo Chong pinched the bridge of his nose, looking helpless. All right, you'll have them. But artisans are a scarce resource right now. Construction is happening everywhere, and everyone's short-staffed." His tone shifted, and he gave a mysterious smile. "But don't you worry. If we lack the manpower, we'll make up for it with machines. I'll send you a batch of automatic carving machines later. A job that once took 10 men can be done by a single man and 1 machine in an afternoon. We will compensate for our shortage of manpower with the power of machines." Yu Ji's eyes lit up instantly, his worries finally put at ease. He continued to lead Luo Chong on the inspection. On either side of Hanyuan Hall were 3-story-high towers, destined to be the future offices for the civil and military officials. Passing through Hanyuan Hall, they came to another vast, empty plaza. Beyond the plaza was the slightly smaller Xianjing Hall, the future location for daily court assemblies, which was also already taking shape. Passing through Xianjing Hall, they arrived at the last of the 3 great halls, Zichen Hall. This was the place where the future emperor would privately summon his confidants to discuss top-secret matters. It was not large, but it felt more intimate. Of course, right now, it was just an empty shell with its main structure completed. The skeletons of all 3 great halls were in place, and the roofs were tiled. From a distance, they looked quite imposing. But up close, one could see bare walls and gaping doorways and windows everywhere, like a rough-cast house that had not been decorated yet. When the wind blew, you could hear it whistling through the empty spaces. A ramp of white marble, like a white dragon, ran through the 3 main halls along the central axis. On either side were long corridors with glazed tile roofs, supported by a row of red pillars. These pillars were another face project. Inside, they were steel and concrete, with a coat of vermilion paint on the outside to mimic the appearance of wood. It was not that Luo Chong was being cheap. He was mainly concerned about wind and sun, and even more so about a fire spreading along the corridors and burning down the entire palace. Further back was the legendary Inner Palace. However, the current Inner Palace could not even be called a rough-cast house. It was purely a bustling construction site. To raise the foundations for the various palaces and pavilions, The workers had excavated earth on site, creating a massive pit. According to the blueprints, this would one day be the shimmering artificial lake, Tay Pond, with a small island in the center for boating, fishing, and enjoying life. But for now, it was just an ugly, unsightly hole in the ground. As for the even more fantastical designs on the blueprints, a royal library blending Chinese and Western styles, a fountain with the 12 zodiac animals. Oh wait, this world had 14 months in a year, so it would have to be a 14 beast heads fountain, a bedchamber with a huge garden terrace and floor-to-ceiling windows, a glass greenhouse covering dozens of acres that could grow vegetables even in winter, and a swimming pool, an artificial hot spring, an indoor gymnasium. All of these currently resided quietly in Luo Chong's mind and on the blueprints. The three of them exited through the main south gate of the Imperial Palace, and a gatehouse so magnificent it was breathtaking stood before them. Vermilion Bird Gate. This gatehouse spanned a width of 86 meters from east to west. Below it were 5 giant, equally sized archways, each wide enough for 2 tractors to race side by side. The depth of the archways, which was also the thickness of the city wall, was a staggering 34 meters. Walking through one was like entering a tunnel. The entire gatehouse, including the 2 stories of buildings on top, was nearly 80 meters tall. Standing there, it was for all intents and purposes a modern high-rise of over 20 stories, except it was much stouter and more robust than the slender skyscrapers of the modern era. However, at this moment, the magnificent Vermilion Bird Gate looked exceptionally lonely. It stood there like a giant without pants, completely bare, with not an inch of city wall connected to it on either side. To facilitate the transport of building materials, all sorts of vehicles simply detoured around the gatehouse, creating a rather comical scene. Directly facing the Vermilion Bird Gate was a straight, grand avenue, Vermilion Bird Avenue. This street was 150 meters wide. My God, this was not a street. It was a super long plaza, a runway capable of landing airplanes. Intersecting Vermilion Bird Avenue in a T-shape was the equally wide Chang'an Avenue. These 2 super boulevards formed the skeleton of the entire capital. In the future, the 3 departments and 6 ministries, the Imperial Central Bank, the museum, the Grand Theater, all the core institutions would be clustered along these 2 streets. The 3 rode on horseback south along Vermilion Bird Avenue. As Luo Chong was pointing out the sights, Yu suddenly slapped his forehead. Chief, last month, a man named Gu Chung came from the Hanyang Prefecture Comprehensive Research Institute. He said you sent him to build the bell tower. But the location wasn't marked on the blueprints, so I took the liberty of placing it in the center of the commercial plaza in the Eastern District. Is that all right? If not, I'll have him move it. Luo Chong pulled out a simple map and took a look. The bell tower? The plaza next to the pedestrian shopping street? That's fine, that's the spot. Did he mention if the tower could be used for anything else? He did. Yu replied without hesitation. He said the tower needs to be tall, dozens of meters, with a lighthouse on top and large clocks on all 4 sides. Inside, we could have a clock and watch museum and sell tickets for admission. And the ground floor could be a clock and watch shop. What do you think, Chief? Luo Chong's lips curled into a slight smile. It seems that fellow Gu Chung has really taken my words to heart, he thought to himself. When he had initially asked Gu Chung to build the bell tower, he had mentioned in passing that they would research pocket watches and wristwatches in the future. He had not expected the man to be so proactive, even planning out the location of the specialty shop in advance. The group arrived at the engineering headquarters and sat down around a huge sand table model of the capital. Looking at the intricate miniature world before them, it was Deshu, who had been silent all along, who furrowed his brow first. He pointed at the sand table, and a barrage of questions shot out like a string of firecrackers. Chief, this capital is so massive. If it's really built, won't it hold hundreds of thousands of people? How many people do we even have in the Han tribe? And all these hundreds of thousands will be city dwellers who don't farm. What will they eat? What will they drink? How many jobs will be needed to support them? Even if they have jobs, who will buy the things they produce? Who will consume it all? And the most critical issue is food. Deshu's voice suddenly rose. Even with a population of 500,000, assuming each person eats 1 pound of rice a day, that's 500,000 pounds a day, 250 tons. And meat. And vegetables. My heavens. How many prefectures and counties farmers would have to go without eating to support a city like this? Hiss. Yu, who had been supervising the work on the side, sucked in a sharp breath his face instantly turning pale. He had been overseeing the construction here for 2 years, his mind filled with how to build the grandest buildings. But he had never once considered these fatal problems. Eating 500,000 pounds of rice a day, just the thought of that number made his scalp tingle. For a moment, you could have heard a pin drop in the command post. Only Luo Chong remained unperturbed, lifting his teacup and gently blowing on the steam, his face betraying no emotion. He pondered for a moment before speaking slowly. The points you've raised are indeed crucial. However, he set down his teacup, looked at the two of them, and said deliberately, "As you yourself said, for the time being, these problems do not yet exist, do they?" Huh. Seeing the incredulous expressions on Deshu and Yu Ji's faces, Luo Chong cleared his throat and began his grand vision for urban development. First, population. Right now, all told, even including the newly affiliated Tang tribe, we only have about 700,000 people. To think we can fill the capital in one fell swoop is both impossible and unnecessary. My plan is to first move in 50,000 people to establish the city's basic framework. Within 5 years, we'll aim for a population of 200,000. As for a future metropolis of 1 million, that's a problem for our grandchildren to worry about. Next, the matter of survival. We'll address food, clothing, and daily necessities one by one. For fuel, we won't be chopping down trees in the city, but we have plenty of coal. The trains will bring it in, and it will be sold at a fair price. Simple as that. For water, we're right next to the Hong Lake water system. We're short on everything but water. As for drinking water, each household can drill a few hand pump wells. A few cranks of the handle, and clean water comes gushing out. How convenient is that? Clothing is even simpler. We'll set up a textile mill right here in the capital. We'll buy cotton from all over, ship it here, and weave our own cloth. That solves the fabric problem and, in the process, creates a wealth of jobs for the city. 2 birds with 1 stone. Finally, and most crucially, food. Luo Chong held up a finger and drew a circle over the suburban area of the sand table. Support from other places? Unnecessary. The capital can achieve food self-sufficiency on its own. For grain, we'll establish large-scale mechanized farms in the outskirts. Once the tractors and harvesters are running, one person can cultivate enough land to feed over 1,000 people. We'll only need a small number of farmers to feed the entire city. Meat is even less of a problem. The Ministry of Agriculture has already mastered the art of pig castration. The pigs they raise are all fat and healthy. The improvement of beef cattle breeds is also progressing smoothly. And sheep, those things breed like rabbits. Think about it. All the straw produced by the farms each year, how much livestock can that feed? And the livestock manure is an excellent fertilizer. Use it to grow vegetables. That's what you call an ecological cycle. And even if we don't raise our own livestock, look at the capital's geographical location. Luo Chong's finger swept across the sand table. To the east is the sea. Freshly caught seafood from Tuahai Prefecture can be on the dinner table in just over 10 hours by train. To the west is Hong Lake, and across from it are the great grasslands. Beef and mutton can be shipped in via the waterways. Are you still worried about not having meat to eat? As for job opportunities, what did you think my industrial plan for the South was for? Just for show? When the time comes, we'll build a row of factories in the capital. Will we still need to worry about workers not having jobs? And the service industry. The capital is so big. People commuting to work, tourists from out of town, don't they need transportation? We can set up a tricycle taxi company and hire people to pedal them. Charge a few coins per person, and we solve the transportation problem while creating jobs. And how many people can the restaurants, inns, and department stores on the commercial streets support? As for not being able to sell the goods we produce, what a joke. The market is only so big. If you produce desperately without regard for demand, you're just a fool. We'll simply adjust production based on demand when the time comes. His speech was a whirlwind of dazzling ideas, leaving Yu Ji and Deshu completely stunned. My heavens. So this is how you run a big city. Human-powered tricycles? They had never seen one, but it sounded a lot like the boat rentals in Hanyang City. The government provided the boats, and people rented them to ferry passengers. After paying the rent, the rest of their earnings were their own. Who would have thought that transportation alone could become such a big business? How many tricycle drivers would that support? And those drivers would also need to eat, drink, and live, which would in turn drive how much more consumption. It was terrifyingly brilliant. Luo Chong chuckled inwardly. He had worried about how to fight wars and how to develop technology, but how to support the people. That was the least of his concerns. Just a few ideas trickling from his mind were enough to keep the people of this era busy for several lifetimes. His biggest worry right now, in fact, was a shortage of people. However, speaking of tricycles, an image of the rickshaws from the Republican era flashed through Luo Chong's mind, and he immediately dismissed it. That contraption treated people like beasts of burden. It was a symbol of servitude. Although the Han tribe had slaves, they were official property. Private ownership was absolutely forbidden. The Han law stated it clearly. The buying and selling of people was a capital offense. Tricycles were different. A person sat on top and pedaled. They were a driver, a laborer. It might only be one extra wheel, but that single difference represented human rights. De Shu, recovering from his shock, raised a new question. Chief, you mentioned using tractors for farming. I've heard that those things can only be used for dryland crops like wheat and corn. But the staple food of our Han tribe is rice. Does that mean the people of the capital will only be able to eat steamed buns in the future? This question did give Luo Chong pause. He pondered for a moment before saying, in the short term, we can plant more wheat and trade the surplus for rice with other prefectures. Corn and sorghum can be used as animal feed and also for brewing alcohol and making sugar. It's not a bad deal to trade these high-value goods for rice. Of course, this is just a temporary solution. The Research Institute will definitely have to crack the problem of rice planting machinery. Once they've figured that out, none of this will be an issue. Hearing that the chief had a plan, De Shu felt relieved. But Yu Ji, who had been listening on the side, had keenly picked up on a key phrase from the conversation, the Yuqiao tribe. His eyes lit up, and he immediately leaned in to ask, Chief, Prefect Lin, that Yuqiao tribe, have you found out their specific location? Luo Chong nodded. We have. They're on the eastern shore of Hong Lake, in the area north of the capital. They live in village-like settlements, totaling 3,000 to 4,000 people. The rest who migrated out can't have gone far. A conservative estimate is that they can add 5,000 people to our population. It's just, I'm currently lacking a capable person to handle this matter. Yuji saw his chance. He immediately recommended a worthy candidate. Chief, I recommend someone, he said, patting his chest. The banner commander under my Jinwu guard, Ying. He was the one who discovered and won over Qiao Yan's group in the first place, and he's on very good terms with them. If we send him, with Qiao Yan and his people cooperating, we'll achieve twice the result with half the effort. Oh, Luo Chong's interest was piqued. Bring this Ying to me. I want to meet him myself. Yes, sir. Yu Ji responded cheerfully and immediately sent his personal guard to summon him. His own little abacus was clicking away furiously. I recommended the man. If the job gets done, how can my name be left off the list of merits? 5,000 people. That's equivalent to the merit of expanding our territory by 2 whole counties out of thin air. At this moment, Ying was still on the construction site, supervising the slaves at work, completely unaware that a massive stroke of good fortune was about to come crashing down on his head. When Yu Ji's personal guard found Ying and informed him that the chief wanted to see him, Ying was utterly bewildered. He stood frozen on the construction site, a whip still dangling from his hand, his mind racing as he frantically reviewed his recent conduct. Have I been slacking? He wondered. Did I skimp on the slaves' rations? What could this be about? With his heart pounding in his chest, he followed the guard into the engineering command post. The moment he entered the room and saw Luo Chong seated in the position of command, Yi Ying's heart skipped a beat. He immediately snapped to attention, clasping his fist in a standard military salute. Jinwu Guard Banner Commander Yi Ying, reporting to the chief and the prefect. May I ask for the reason I've been summoned? Luo Chong got straight to the point. The elder of the Yuqiao tribe has told me the location of their main camp. It's estimated there are at least 5,000 people there. I plan to send someone to invite all 5,000 of them back, without leaving a single one behind. Yu Ji recommended you, saying you're familiar with them, and that sending you would yield twice the result with half the effort. So what do you say? Do you dare to take on this task? Yi Ying's brain froze for 3 seconds, then a massive wave of ecstasy shot through his body like an electric current. Bringing the Yuqiao tribe into the fold? The merit would be monumental. And commander, you had recommended him? This was a gift from the heavens. He was just a minor banner commander now. If he pulled this off, then in the future. Yi Ying's face flushed red with excitement. Forgetting all decorum, he dropped to one knee with a thud, clasped his hands, and his voice trembled. Chief, rest assured. I, Yi Ying, am willing to make a military pledge. I will bring back every last member of the Yuqiao tribe. Luo Chong remained non-committal, simply looking at him coolly. Oh, tell me, how do you plan to do it? This was a test. Ying knew it in his heart. Whether he could seize this opportunity depended entirely on his next answer. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. Reporting to the chief. The Yuqiao are constantly migrating for one simple reason: survival. They still rely on hunting and gathering, a precarious existence. Therefore, we must open their eyes to a better way. I believe we can first use our connection with Xiao Yin to establish contact. We will bring our finest goods as gifts to build familiarity. However, we must absolutely not give them grain seeds and livestock for free. If they learn to farm and raise animals for themselves, becoming self-sufficient, why would they ever agree to leave their lands and come with us? So, we must first entice them with desirable goods, then demonstrate the marvels of our advanced technology, and finally, invite their leaders to see for themselves the prosperity of the Han tribe. Once they've witnessed our way of life, how could they resist the urge to join us? Ying spoke with passionate conviction, but Luo Chong's expression remained unchanged after he finished. This strategy was too conventional. The Han tribe had persuaded the Yujiang tribe back in the early days using this very method. The problem was, it was too slow. The back and forth of giving gifts, arranging tours, and then returning to collect the people, it would take at least a year and a half, if not longer. Too much trouble. Luo Chong shook his head. And it's too risky. What if they don't take the bait? All our efforts would be wasted. He paused, a meaningful smile playing on his lips. We can be more direct. More direct. Yu Ji and Ying looked at each other, confused. It was Deshu who seemed to have grasped the implication. He asked tentatively. The chief means the fact that the Yuqiao are poor plays right into our hands? Bingo. Luo Chong snapped his fingers. Give them gifts to build a relationship? Do they even deserve it? Back in the day, the Yujiang tribe knew how to build houses, keep bees, and farm. The Tang tribe could even smelt iron. We treated such civilized tribes with courtesy out of respect. But what are the Yuqiao? Just a bunch of savages still living in a primitive state. Deshu immediately understood and chimed in. The chief means we should use our goods directly, just as we did with the Dream Valley Spring Fair in the early years, and simply buy their population. They lack everything. We have everything. One hand pays the price, the other takes the person. The people we acquire can be immediately dispersed among the various prefectures and counties to integrate into our way of life. As for the remaining Yuqiao, once we've bought up all their young and able-bodied members, won't they be completely at our mercy? It can be done like that. Yu Ji and Yi Ying were dumbfounded, their worldviews nearly shattered. Yi Ying was the quickest to react. He immediately followed this line of thought and added, the chief is brilliant. By purchasing them with goods, as long as we can find them, we will never return empty-handed. Moreover, the elder said their tribe is on the eastern shore of Hong Lake. Why don't we just go by water? Traveling by boat allows us to carry more goods, and we can bring back more people on the return trip. We can also establish a forward base on the lakeshore, from which we can advance or retreat as needed. Exactly. Luo Chong banged the table. The elder did mention that some of his clansmen migrated west, so they must have reached the lake. If we search along the shore, we're bound to find them. Deshu immediately jumped in. I'll arrange the fleet. 4 3-masted ships, for 2-masted schooners, plus 2 smaller boats for landings. They'll depart from Tuahai Prefecture. The person in charge can meet them at the docks. Good. Luo Chong made a swift decision. It's settled. Yi Ying, you will lead the team, with the temporary title of caravan captain. Pick 200 articulate men from the Jinwu Guard. On your way, stop by Xiaoyan's village and pick up a dozen guides and translators. I want to see the people before the end of the year. Yes, sir. Your subordinate obeys. Yi Ying trembled with excitement and kowtowed heavily. He knew his chance for promotion and fortune had arrived. With this matter settled, Luo Chong returned to Tuahai Prefecture without delay. The construction of the capital, the quarrying and transport of stone from Panshir Prefecture, the layout of the southern industrial zone. A mountain of issues awaited his decision. In particular, completing the railway from Qian Prefecture to Taiyang Prefecture was of the utmost importance. Without this great steel artery, the industrial heart of the south could not beat strongly. Mulling it over, he realized the entire plan to invigorate the south was bottlenecked by 2 railway lines. Luo Chong sighed inwardly. Without these 2 steel arteries, even the most magnificent blueprint was nothing more than a pipe dream. The group once again boarded the clattering train for the return journey to Tuahai Prefecture. Passing by the Yuqiao village, Luo Chong made a point of speaking with Xiao Yin and the elder, requesting that they send a few strong young men to act as guides. When the two heard it was to find their lost kinsmen and help them achieve the same prosperous life, they readily agreed, slapping their chests in assurance. Little did they know, however, that Luo Chong's so-called invitation was, in fact, a purchase with a very clear price tag. The moment he was back in Tuahai Prefecture, Luo Chong fired off his first question. Who knows what corner of the world our tribe's professional railway construction team is holed up in now? De Shu and the other guards exchanged blank looks, none of them able to answer. That construction team, formerly composed of over 1,000 prisoners from the Kaiyuan War, were now all registered citizens of the Han tribe. For years, they had been like busy little bees, buzzing off to wherever a railway was needed. But once a job was done, only Luo Chong himself knew their next destination. Reporting to the chief, a guard responsible for handling official documents stepped forward. The road construction team is currently in Qian Prefecture, working with Lord Yu Fu on the Qian-Taigong Railway. Good, as long as he knew where they were. Luo Chong immediately took up his brush and, with a few swift strokes, wrote out an order, sending it by Eagle Post with the utmost urgency to Yu Fu. The order was simple and brutal. 1. The railway construction team is to be split in two, forming Team 1 and Team 2. 2. Team 1 will continue working with you to complete the Qian-Taigong line. 3. Team 2 is to get their asses over to Tangxing Prefecture immediately and break ground on the Tangxing-Pancher line. After sending one order, Luo Chong was not yet satisfied and dashed off several more in quick succession. One of them flew straight to the governor's mansion on Cheongzhou Island, ordering the 2,500 soldiers of the Baodao Guard to be immediately discharged from active duty, reorganized on the spot into the 1st Railway Engineering Regiment, and then shipped to Tuahai Prefecture at top speed to supplement the two newly formed railway construction teams. The Baodao Guard had originally been mercenaries hired from the Tang tribe during the attack on Zhu Island, and their contracts had long since expired. Now, with the army downsizing, sending them home to build railways was a contribution to their own homeland's development. He presumed there would not be too much resistance. Immediately after, another order flew to Jiahai Prefecture, commanding Prefect Zhu Ping to immediately pull 1,000 men from the prisoners of war building the Cross-Sea Bridge and send them to Pancher Prefecture to quarry marble. Luo Chong had given Yu Ji his word that the building materials would be in place by next spring. The railway was not finished yet, but the quarrying could begin right away. With the manpower arranged, it was time for the equipment. The last two orders went out. One was for the Comprehensive Research Institute on Huxin Island, instructing them to send all their newly developed picric acid explosives to Railway Team 1 and the Pancher Prefecture Quarry. For blasting mountains and splitting rock, you needed this stuff. The other was sent to Dili in Sinan Prefecture, immediately. Right now, send me 2 locomotives and a pile of road-building tools. Narrow-gauge steel rails, railroad spikes, steam-powered water pumps, air compressors, pneumatic drills. Send me as many as you have. Requisition 2 locomotives from the mines for emergency use, and have Sinan Prefecture work overtime to manufacture more to fill the gap. With these few orders issued, the entire Han tribe, like a vast and precise war machine, roared to life and began operating at high speed. Wait! Luo Chong slapped his forehead. He'd forgotten something: artisans. The exquisite carved beams and painted rafters of the Imperial Palace in the capital could not be done by slaves alone. He thought it over and, in the end, had no choice but to pry a few dozen master carvers from the shipyards and lumber mills of Luoyang and Hanyang prefectures. It was not many people, but they would have to make do for now. At worst, they could recruit a batch of apprentices and learn on the job. He refused to believe that the Han tribe, with its population of hundreds of thousands, could not build a single imperial palace. Sheets of orders, stamped with the Great Seal, rode on eagle's wings, flying out in all directions. Cheongzhou Island, the governor's mansion. Grand Governor Yang Feng held the order, his face calm. The Baodao Guard had always been mercenaries. Reorganizing them into an engineering corps was, in his view, a predictable development. He immediately forwarded the order, while simultaneously issuing one of his own. The Yingyang Guard of Chaoyang Prefecture was to be transferred to garrison Yashan Prefecture, which the Baodao Guard had vacated. Yashan Prefecture was Cheongzhou Island's most important port and could not be left without a garrison. As for Chaoyang Prefecture, it was populated by the fishermen of the Yu clan, who were among the first to pledge allegiance to the Han tribe. Their loyalty was absolute. There was no need for a heavy military presence. Of course, as Grand Governor, he only had command authority, not the power to transfer troops. He still had to notify the person in charge of administration, Cheongzhou Provincial Inspector Xue Qingyao. Only after the two of them met and agreed would the matter be settled. The Yingyang Guards soon broke camp and departed, while the soldiers of the Baotao Guard shed the armor they had worn for years with a final clatter. To be honest, many of them had mixed feelings about being discharged. In their years as soldiers, they had not fought many battles, but they had received their pay without fail and feasted on white rice and meat at every meal. Life was far more comfortable than it had been at home. Yet, the thought of returning to their wives, children, and warm beds was undeniably appealing. Fortunately, the chief's order was for reorganization, not disbandment. The moment they heard they were simply being renamed the 1st Railway Engineering Regiment, with the same pay, and would be returning to their own homeland to build railways, every soldier's face lit up with joy. Only a few who requested leave to visit their families were temporarily denied. On the very day the order was given, a dozen empty ships borrowed from the cross-sea bridge construction site conveniently collected this freshly minted regiment of railway engineers. Meanwhile, all the components of the colossal machine that was the Han tribe were spinning at high speed. The Comprehensive Research Institute on Huxin Island immediately arranged for its chemical plant to load barrels of yellow picric acid explosives and send them to the front lines. In Sinan Prefecture, Dali stared at Luo Chong's order for 8 new trains with a worried frown. It was a struggle to build even one a month. There was no other way. He had to first pull 2 locomotives from his own mines for the emergency, then order the factory to run 3 shifts and produce for dear life. At this moment, in the rugged mountains between Qian and Taigang prefectures, Yu Fu was scowling at Luo Chong's order to send away half his men. The Qian-Taigang line was the most difficult railway the Han tribe had ever undertaken. He already felt he was short-staffed, and now the chief was pulling the rug out from under him. But when he read the second half of the order, which stated that he would be reinforced with at least 1,000 engineering troops converted from regular army soldiers, his sour expression instantly broke into a wide, beaming grin. Heh, the chief really does think of everything. He slapped his thigh and cheerfully sent the men on their way. This Qian-Taigang line, stretching 460 kilometers, was a project of infernal difficulty. Luo Chong's plan was simple and brutal. Cut a path through every mountain, build a bridge over every river, and take the shortest straight line possible. To achieve this, the entire line required the excavation of 6 tunnels with a total length of nearly 50 kilometers, as well as the construction of 13 bridges, 6 of which were canyon bridges spanning sheer cliffs. At present, the Han tribe's only road construction team was working on the least difficult first section of the line, which ran through the plains. Yu Fu, meanwhile, had personally led an elite detachment of over 200 men to the most challenging section of the project, the construction site of Tunnel Number 1. The site was like a small, mechanized military encampment. 2 tractors with buckets were present, one hauling coal, the other tools. A giant rock drill, modified from an excavator, stretched out its menacing iron arm, and a loader stood ready to clear the rubble after blasting. In addition, there were 300 war horses, 24-wheeled carts laden with supplies, and even 500 live, frisky goats and antelopes, watched over by a dozen sheepdogs, serving as the team's mobile larder. The men under Yu Fu's command were all superbly equipped, with bows, crossbows, swords, and sabers. In these primal mountains, they were both engineers and the most valiant of warriors. The mountain wind howled, making the camp's flags snap and flutter. Yu Fu stood at the mouth of the tunnel, gazing into the bottomless darkness before him. There was not a trace of fear in his eyes, only the burning flame of conquest. The team set up camp at the mouth of Tunnel Number 1, while the engineers huddled around the blueprints, locked in a heated discussion. After receiving Luo Chong's order, Yu Fu wasted no words. He immediately sent a messenger to relay the command, then strode over to find Yang Xian, the engineer in charge of the construction plan. Yang Xian, is the plan finalized? The men have been stuck in these desolate mountains for 2 days. When can we start? Yang Xian was a technical expert transferred from the Dongxin Prefecture coal mine, a master of geological surveys and tunneling. He was squatting on the ground with several other technicians, sketching and calculating with a tree branch. He looked up only when he heard Yu Fu's impatient prodding. "Lord Yu, the plan is mostly ready," he said, pointing to the rough sketch on the ground. "This tunnel is over 3,000 meters long. If it only had to accommodate a small train like the Endeavor, it would be simple. But the chief has ordered that all tunnels and bridges must be built to the highest standard from the start, capable of handling future heavy freight trains." Yu Fu's brow furrowed. "I don't care how difficult it is. I'm asking you, can it be done? And when?" Yang Xin was speechless. He felt like a beleaguered contractor dealing with an unreasonable client. He patiently explained, "It can be done. The tunnel needs to be at least 12 meters wide and 12 meters high to meet the requirements for 2 parallel heavy freight lines. The geology is fine, too. The entire mountain is solid rock, so there's no risk of collapse. Our plan is to sink 3 10-meter diameter vertical shafts from the mountaintop, dividing the tunnel into 4 sections. We'll excavate from 8 work faces simultaneously. That'll be the fastest way. As for the excavation method, we can use blasting or the ancient fire setting and water quenching technique. But regardless of the method, we must first use a pneumatic hammer to carve out an isolation trench along the tunnel's perimeter to prevent the entire mountain from collapsing." "Good." Yu Fu slapped his thigh decisively after hearing the plan. "Let's do it. We'll use this tunnel number 1 as a practice run. Once we have the experience, the rest of the work will be much easier." "You got it." Yang Xian grew excited as well. This was the Han tribe's first railway tunnel. If they succeeded, it would surely be written about in the history books one day. With a single command, the entire camp sprang into action. On the first day, the workers cleared all the vegetation near the tunnel entrance, burned it off, and then the excavators rumbled up, carving a massive platform out of the mountainside. After dark, the technical team set up a simple projection box with a carbide lamp inside. A huge, semicircular beam of light was projected clearly onto the flattened rock face. The workers immediately used bamboo poles dipped in white lime to trace the outline of the tunnel onto the rock, following the edge of the light. Everything was ready. Early the next morning, as the explosives had not yet arrived, the engineering team decided to start with the fire setting and water quenching method. The modified excavator was the first to take the stage. Its long mechanical arm was now fitted with a menacing alloy steel pneumatic hammer. Rat-a-tee-tee-tee-tee-tee-tee. As the operator stomped on the air valve, a deafening roar echoed through the valley. The alloy steel hammer pounded the rock at a frantic pace of 5 or 6 times per second. Rock chips flew everywhere with a crackling sound. In just 10 seconds, a basin-sized pit was gouged into the hard rock face. "Whoa!" A cheer erupted from everyone present. The efficiency was incredible. Tunneling didn't seem so hard after all. The operator's confidence soared. He maneuvered the mechanical arm, hammering down again and again. "Chief Engineer Yang, how deep should I go? Shove the whole damn hammerhead in there." "You got it. Just watch me." One man, one machine, worked from sunrise to sunset. When the last ray of sunlight disappeared behind the mountain ridge, a cave 2 meters deep and the size of a doorway had appeared in the solid rock face. The operator was exhausted, but the others could not rest. During the day, they cleared rubble, set up camp, chopped firewood, herded goats, and diverted water sources. At night, another shift took over. As night fell, the construction site did not fall silent.